Good day everyone. So here's to another video presentation with me. I am John Samuel and today we are going to tackle a topic under the research in social studies 1. And this would be a long discussion, so make sure to make yourself comfortable. So sit back and relax. And there's nothing more satisfying than to start anything in a funny way. So before we dive into the um, facts and knowledge about our topic for today, for the discussion proper, let us all first have the game Wika Rambulan.
Goal!
So, how many scores did you got? Those words that we had on the Wika Rambulan game are related to what we are going to discuss for today. So, do you have any idea of what will be our topic for today? Yes, we are going to discuss about internal and external validity and threats related to them. So, what is the nature of internal and external validity and what are the types of threats to internal and external validity? So, to start with, let us all first discuss the internal validity. Okay. So, first, we are going to discuss what is internal validity. So what is the nature of internal validity? According to Frankel and company, there is an internal validity in the research if the relationship observed between two or more variables is unambiguous to or rather than being due to something else. So yung na-conclude natin na relationship doon sa mga variables na meron tayo sa ating research should be because that is how the two variables or more variables relate and not because of the factors around them that leads for the data that we have to speak na may relationship sila. So internal validity means that the observed differences on the dependent and the independent variable should be direct and not due to some other unintended variable. So, to explain better, we should first know what are these unintended variables. So, these unintended variables are those threats to the internal validity that we have. So, when we say internal validity threats, it includes the experimental procedures, the treatments, the experiences of the participant. They threaten the researcher's ability to draw correct inferences from the data about the population or in an experiment or in a study. So, yung mga threats to internal validity, ito yung nagko-compromise sa result ng ating research study. Sila yung somehow parang nagpapawalang bisa o naglalagay ng question mark dun sa result na meron tayo sa ating research study. So, to ensure that our research study or the result of the research study that we have is valid and unquestionable, we should look after with these threats to internal validity. So what are these threats to internal validity? Well, first, we have history, kasaysayan. But in research study, in the threats to internal validity, when we say history, it refers to the events that might exist during the research study. So, yung event na yun yung mga bagay or mga pangyayari na maaaring pagdaanan ng ating mga respondents that might affect the way they respond to our instruments. Like, for example, or may research study tayo, tapos yung mga participant natin is mga workers on a company. A week before the test or the data gathering is nag-announce yung boss nila na magkakaroon ng layoff doon sa company nila. Syempre, yung mga iba kinabahan, layoff, so na-stress yung mga workers na yon, mga respondents natin yon. And those stress na nararamdaman nila might affect the way they respond to our instruments. And of course, that would affect what kind of data yung magagather natin from them. So, if yung kanilang response is influenced na nung event, yung result natin is magiging questionable na siya. Kasi nga, if there was never an event or was never an layoff na in-announce before the data gathering, then parang hindi ganon yung data na magagather natin. So, whatever conclusion we may derive on the data we gathered on that time, magiging questionable na because affected na nga yung responses ng ating mga respondents. To prevent this thing from happening, the possible response that as researchers that we could have is we can have both the experimental and control groups experience the same external events. So, if they experience the same external events, though it might affect them, it might affect the respondents, at least if they go through the same experience, so same din yung magiging effect sa kanila. So wala masyadong malaking difference o pagkakaiba doon sa mga response nila because they go through the same experience and they got the same event, feelings. So, ayun. Number 2, another kind of threat to internal validity that we have is the maturation. So, maturation, yung pag-mature ng ating mga respondents. Participant in an experiment may mature or change during the experiment, thus influencing the result. Like, for the example situation we have, mayroong research doon sa mga workers din, for example, ng isang company. And for example, yung research na yun, it talks about the effectivity of an approach or a new strategy na ginamit ng company para i-train or turuan yung mga workers nila, no? But of course to measure the effectivity, magkakaroon ng pre-test at post-test para nga anong nalaman nila prior to the implementation of the experiment, the strategy, and then 1 month after the implementation of strategy. However, if yung mga workers some of the workers na magiging respondents natin kapag ganun yung study natin will be new, then of course they would have little to no knowledge about the job kasi nga baguhan sila. And after 1 month, of course, they have gained knowledge na doon sa job kasi nga they had experience for 1 month already. So, magkakaroon na ng effect yon sa the way they would respond to the instrument. So it would show na they know better already about the job than they did during the pre-test. However, it is because they had experience and not because of whatever kind of strategy or approach that were imposed to train them. So, nako-compromise, no? So, yung result na yon na meron tayo is because of the maturity of that time that the respondents had gone through and the experience they had during the implementation or the research. And possible response that we could have is that the researcher can select participants who mature or change at the same rate during the experiment. So, kahit naman if they mature man in at the time that the research are being implemented, at least they would mature on the same rate. So, maturation and the history, yung pinipinpoint natin dito is yung population natin, no? So, what we suggest to prevent history and maturation to affect greatly on our result is kumuha tayo nung mga respondents, yung population natin ng respondents should be have that same age brackets or if possible from same group para if there is an event that might affect them and if they go through a maturation process, magiging same lang yung impact sa kanila and hindi siya masyadong mag-i-impact on what results will we have on the data gathering and so thus in the conclusion. Another type of threat to internal validity that we have is the regression. So, dito naman sa regression, yung pino-point out natin dito is yung luck, no? Kasi, for example, or the description says that participants with extreme scores are selected for the experiment. So naturally, their scores will probably change during the experiment. Score over time regress towards the mean. Yung kinuha natin na mga respondents is on extreme sides ng ating score table. For example, we got the lowest scorers as our respondents and the highest scorers as another respondents. Focusing on the lowest scorer, those people who got the lowest scores in test, maybe yung kanilang naging score noong nag-test tayo is just because minamala sila nun or yung mga naka-perfect naman is siniswerte sila nun. So, chances are, if hindi na sila sinwerte, those highest scorers might have lower scores. Those low scorers, pag sinwerte naman sila, might have higher score. So, that is regression. Habang paulit-ulit nating binibigay yung ating exam on the same population, chances are the scores of those students will regress towards the mean. Unti-unti, babalik siya or napupunta siya sa mean. Kasi nga, luck cannot be maintained, di ba? So, maaring one day, swerte ka, one day, you're not. So, that. Like, for example, or an example situation we have, because participants are placed into group based on their initial scores, it's hard to say whether the outcomes will be due to the treatment or statistical norms. No? So, talaga bang ganun ang naging result or talaga bang lahat ng mga higher scorers bumaba talaga yung mga score nila or talaga bang lahat ng low scorers ay unti-unting tumaas yung scores nila or is it just because of the luck, that they have? So a possible response that we can do to prevent the regression on threatening the result of the validity of a result is that we could select participants who do not have extreme scores as an interesting characteristic for the experiment. So we should avoid that. We should avoid getting respondents that has you know is has extreme scores during the test. Another thing that could um, affect the internal validity of our research is the selection bias or the subject characteristic threat that we as the researchers have. So in selection, it talks about the way we select our respondents. Like for example, we have the brightest students be on the same group and the low scorers on the same group. Um, and we use them to represent a certain population. So the result of the study that uses them as a population might not account to the entire population that they are representing, given the fact that they have these certain characteristic that sets them different from the entire population that they are representing. And another example is that, for example, low scorers were placed in group A and the high scorers were placed in group B. Because they have this characteristic that differs them from each other, the result that we researchers might get from them, or we might derive from them, might not be because of the treatment that is used among them. So, for of course, magkakaroon na ng difference yon. So, yung difference na makikita natin, may not be because of the treatment, may not be because of what we are trying to observe on them, but mainly because magkakaroon talaga ng difference yon because academically, they differ. So, what we can do to prevent that from happening is mag-random sampling na lang. This random sampling would allow us na mag-select ng students, or I mean ng respondents, not on based on our own bias, but based on the power of luck. So depende na lang kung sino sa entire population yung makukuha nating maging respondents para sa ating research. In that style or in that approach, may ensure natin na walang bias na ma-involve o personal bias na mai-involve sa pag-select ng ating mga respondents. Next, we have the mortality. So, when we say mortality, yung mga namamatay. But in research, in threats to internal validity, when we say mortality, those are, or these are, refers to the participant who dropped out during the experiment. So, regardless naman yon ng reason. So, yung mga outcomes doon sa mga nag-drop nating mga participant is, of course, ano na nga, kasi nga nag-drop sila. For example, 20% of participant is nag-drop out sila during the research. So, what will happen is that hindi na natin malalaman ano yung magiging responses nila given nga nag-drop out na sila. And for example, another example is that, for example, meron tayong mga treatment groups. So we have the group 1 and group 2. Tapos 20 participants and the entire population dropped out during the research. And out of the 20, 15 talaga yung nawala sa isang grupo. So maaapektuhan na yung mga data na makukuha natin sa dalawang grupo given na hindi not equal yung number of participants na meron tayo in each group. So, a response to this problem para maiwasan yung threat na ito is that we should recruit a larger sample of our respondents to account for those dropouts. Magkaroon tayo ng mga reserva. If we have reserves, if may nag-drop out, then syempre ano natin sila, mapupuna natin yung pagkukulang na yon. And we should also compare those who drop out with those who continue. Like for example, baka merong isang bagay that is common with all those na nag-drop out. And if does it make them that different or them different from those who continue. So, maaari nating i-incorporate yon on our conclusion, on our result, the discussion of the result. Pwedeng madagdag pa yon sa ating results and discussion. And another is that explore the reason for such loss. And as I said, you can offer an argument as to why the reasons are not relevant to the particular study at hand. Type 6, we have testing. So when we say testing, yung pagbibigay natin nung pre-test and post-test. So participant become familiar with the outcome measures and remember response for later testing. Like for example, part of the research is to give a pre-test and post-test. Nagiging familiar na yung mga respondents sa instrument natin. Kaya malaki yung chance na on the post test is talagang tataas yung scores nila kasi makakapag-prepare na sila. So, like for example, participants showed higher productivity at the end of the study because the same test was as administered. Due to familiarity or awareness of the study's purpose, many participants achieved high results. So, what we can do about that is we can have a longer time interval between administration of the outcomes or to use different items on the later test than were used in the earlier test. This leads us naman dun sa mga principles in giving assessment like as we discussed with Ma'am Vasquez, there should be enough time sa pag-administer ng pre-test and post-test so that hindi na i-invalidate yung mga result na magiging legit yung figures na makukuha natin from the students. And if we are to have pre-test and post-test, we can have the same kind of test but not identical. So, the same content, the same yung magiging hinahanap natin sa mga students, pero hindi identical yung test na ibibigay. Instrumentation is also a thing that could have a great effect on the validity of our result. It talks about how the instruments are used, no? So the way we use our instrument constitutes to threat to internal validity of a study. Like there are actually 3 types of threat under the instrumentation. We have the instrument decay, the data collector's characteristics, and the data collector's bias. So in instrument decay, it is talking about the instrumentation being changed in a way or another. Like for example, yung standards na ginagamit natin sa pag-measure is nagbago over time. Like it became better or it became worse because of different reasons. Like for example, I as a researcher saw that the standard I use is so low para sa mga respondents ko. So tinaasan ko ng konti para naman maging mag-align doon sa pino-foresee ko na or sa hypothesis na ginawa ko. So mali yon. It invalidates or hindi na valid o hindi na legit yung nagiging result natin kasi nga dinistort natin yung standard na sinet natin sa start ng ating research. So dapat is if may standard na tayo sinet is dapat yun na yung gamitin nating standard all throughout the study regardless of the whatever things that might occur or might happen during the research. Possible response is that we could schedule the data collection and ilagay natin kung what time tayo dapat na collect ng data para if tuloy-tuloy yung pag-collect ng data natin is wala na tayong time para i-change pa yung standard natin given that data collection was made continuously. So walang putol-putol. Okay. And next, under instrumentation is the data collector's characteristics. So the characteristics of the data collector is also affecting or might affect the validity of our research study. So the gender, age, ethnicity might affect the nature of the data they obtain. So the response would be dapat gumamit na lang ng same data collectors throughout analyzing data separately for each collector and ensuring that each collector is used equally with all groups. Like for example, we have different data collector sa isang research natin. Then may mga tawag dito, mga comparison group studies tayo. So dapat yung data collector na ginamit natin sa group 1 is dapat magkaroon din siya ng ambag sa data collection na magaganap dun sa group 2. So para mabalance yung maging result ng study natin kasi may inclusion or may presence ng mga data collectors in each of the group and wag dapat nag-change yung ating mga data collector. So kung sino yung data collector from the start up until the end, dapat siya na rin. Another is under the instrumentation, threat to internal validity is the data collector's bias. So just like the data collector characteristics, yung biases ng ating mga data collector also might affect the validity of our result. Like they might unconsciously distort the data in such a way to make certain outcomes like more likely for them. Like again, as I said, gusto nilang mag-agree yung result dun sa hypothesis nila. So somehow dinidistort nila yung mga data. So mali yon kasi nga na-invalidate yung ating result. So, possible response is that you should standardize all procedure which usually require some sort of training of the data collectors and ensure that the data collector lack the information they would need to distort the result. So, dapat as long as possible, walang kakayanan yung ating mga data distort yung result ng ating data na na-gather natin during the data gathering. Another vital area that should be looked upon when we are having a research is also the location because like other mentioned things before, location can also alter or might have a impact on the way that the respondents presents the data or supplies the data that we need for the research. The participant location in which the data are collected or in which the intervention is carried out may create alternative explanation for the result. So, simply, yung location natin maaaring makaapekto doon sa mga bagay na kinokollect natin or doon sa pagsagot ng mga students sa pag-provide nila ng mga data na gusto nating i-provide. Like, just for example, who could answer better? Those students na are in a space na peaceful, na quiet, or yung respondent na nasa magulo at nasa isang madilim na sulok. Well, obviously, the respondent doon sa lugar na conducive for responding will respond better than the latter. So, classroom in which students are taught may have more or have less resource, workstation, lighting, or teacher who may skew their results inadvertently. So, and the location in which the tests are administered may affect the responses. Parents' assessment of their children may be different when done at home rather than school. So, location holds a significant value on the way that the student will respond to the instrument. Just simply that is how location is a big thing on to consider on the research process on the data collection. So that possible response is of course we should hold the location constant. Wag paiba-iba yung location natin sa pag-collect ng data, like the other half will be um given the test or the instrument on classroom, while the other half will be given the instrument on the playground na magulo at mainit, so something like that. And that keep same for all participants. When it is not feasible, you should, as a researcher, try to ensure that different locations do not systematically favor or jeopardize the hypothesis. So, dapat yung gagamitin natin na space for interview or for the data collection should be neutral. So, hindi dapat parang should not favor the hypothesis or should not go against the hypothesis para yung ating result is maging valid pa din. Okay, last thing to consider naman in looking on the maintaining the internal validity of our research and the research result is the attitudes of the subjects. So ngayon, bumabalik tayo dito sa ating mga respondents. So, it is described as the way how the subjects view a study and participate in it. So, yon, it threatens the internal validity. Under the attitude of the subject on the way they respond, or I mean they view the study, there is two kinds under the attitude of the subject. There is a Hawthorne effect and there is the John Henry effect. So, yung Hawthorne effect, it's just about the respondents being conscious na sila ay pinag-aaralan, sila ay pinagtutuunan ng pansin, sila ay binibigyan ng atensyon, at sila ay nakaka-receive ng treatment, ng magandang treatment. So, if they receive that kind of treatment or that attention, then they perform better. And if they receive no treatment at all, then they perform poorly. So, yan yung nagiging nangyayari, no, in Hawthorne effect. Example situation is flashed in the screen. It was accidentally discovered that productivity improved not only when the improvements were made physically or in physical working condition, but also when conditions were intentionally made worse. So, the recognition and the attention that they received made the respondents perform better. So hindi yung pagdating naman sa data, so ibig sabihin hindi talaga yun yung nagiging result. Also, dapat na result ng study natin. Ganun lang yung naging result dahil alam ng mga respondents na pinag-aaralan sila. On the John Henry effect na naman, yung nag-a-alter nung response ng mga data na binibigay ng ating mga respondents is their yung data is altered by the fact that they are aware about being compared. So, knowing that they are being compared, especially if there's comparison made on the experimental group, they behave differently than they typically would do to compensate the perceived disadvantage. So, syempre, ayaw naman nila na the result of the study would say that they are lesser than the other group or that the other group is better than them. So, they tend to try their best. Okay, so para ma-prevent natin yung mga ganitong bagay to affect the validity of our research is, una, dapat participants should not be aware that they are being experimented and should not be informed about what is the hypothesis that we have on the study. So, wag na lang silang i-inform. So, para wala nang tanong that they are not being experimented. Another remedy to this threat is to provide a control or comparison group with a special novel treatment comparable to that received by the experimental group.
Good day everyone. Our next topic is all about external validity. So what is external validity? According to Frankel et al. 2022, external validity is the extent to which the result of a study can be generalized determines the external validity of a study. It means that it is the extent to which you can generalize the findings of a study to other situations, people, settings, and measures. In other words, can you apply the findings of your study to a broader context? External validity is all about going outside of your study to a particular focus. For example, if you're assessing a new medication or a new educational program, you don't want to know that it's effective for a handful of people. You want to apply those results beyond just the experimental setting and the particular individuals that participated. That's generalizability and the heart of a matter for external validity. Unlike internal validity, external validity doesn't assess causality and ruling out confounders. So there are three types of threats according to Creswell 2014, and those three types of threats are the interaction of selection and treatment, the interaction of setting and treatment, and the interaction of history and treatment. These threats arise when experimenters draw incorrect inferences from the sample data to other persons, other settings, and past or future situations. So let's discuss the first type of threat to external validity, the interaction of selection and treatment. Because of the characteristics of the setting of participants in an experiment, our researchers cannot generalize to individuals in other settings. This type of threat in external validity occurs when a treatment effect is found only for specific. Those we select for our studies have different reactions to the program and to the treatment. Also, it is when we select high potentials for our study. This type of threat is all about the characteristics of participants. For example, a large majority of the studies in psychology recruit undergraduates looking to get extra credits to their courses. However, these participants may differ from a larger population in a number of factors like age, IQ, and socioeconomic status. By this or in response to this, our researchers restrict claims about groups to which the results cannot be generalized. The researchers need to conduct additional experiments with groups with different characteristics. The second threat to external validity is the interaction of setting and treatment. Because of the characteristics of the setting of participants in an experiment, our researchers cannot generalize to individuals in other settings. The research environment is stupidly a very controlled and artificial one, very much unlike the everyday world that we want to generalize our findings to. It is important for the studies to be able to control our possible extremes variables to be sure of the relationship between the independent and dependent variables. This threat to external validity concerns the extent to which the environmental conditions or setting under which an experimental study was conducted can be duplicated in other settings. The actions that the researchers can take in this threat is the researchers need to conduct additional experiments in new setting to see if the same results occur as the initial setting. It means that the researchers need to conduct and undergo another experiment to a new settings to see if there's a difference or a similarity to the results which was conducted in the initial settings. And the last threat to external validity is the interaction of history and treatment. Not only should researchers be cautious about generalizing to other populations, caution should be taken to generalize to a different time period. As time passes, the conditions under which treatment work change. These threats were developed when the researchers tries to generalize the findings to a past and future situations. The researchers should not assume that the results will be the same in the future as they were in the past. In response, the researchers need to replicate the study at later times to determine if the same results occur as in the earlier time. And those are the three types of threats to external validity. That would be all. Thank you for listening.